welcome, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Remixing Politics and Culture with me, your host, Pam. I am a public relations and marketing professional with a passion for social justice, voter advocacy, and culture. And tonight is the Sunday before the midterm elections that will take place on November 8th. And needless to say, this is a most consequential election. If you can hear me, please make sure you put a one in the chat, no matter where you're coming from. If you're coming from YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn, put a one in the chat. I can tell where you're coming from. If you're on YouTube or any of those platforms, please like the video and consider subscribing. I would be so appreciative. Okay, so all of my guests are here and I'm going to introduce them one by one. We're going to talk all about the election, why we must vote, concerns that we have, and plenty of other things. Okay. All right. My first guest I'm bringing up, she is the only candidate that we have today on our panel, and she is Renee Schalk. Hey, Renee. She is running for Justice of the Peace for District 3 in the suburb of Austin, Texas. Welcome, Renee. Welcome back to the show. I can't hear you. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself, Renee. Say something. You're still muted. Oh boy. You're still muted. You can work that out. Okay, our next guest is Narissa Smith. There she is. Narissa is a lawyer, speaker, teacher, and journalist. For over a decade, she worked as a law professor, teaching constitutional law, criminal law, and critical race theory. Welcome, Narissa.
Hello.
Hello. And I just need Renee, I need you to unmute yourself, honey. Okay, there you go. Oh, I see. She's muting herself because of her kids. All right.
Hi, Pam. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I was trying to do multitask at the same time. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Okay, so we have next is Latrice Davis. Latrice is no stranger to the show. She is one of my diehards that comes on regularly. Latrice is a senior court clerk at Queens County Civil Court. She is a former reporter with the Associated Press and a board member of Queens Community Board 6, where she was asked to serve there, and she serves the Aging and Social Services and Disabilities Committee. Welcome, Latrice.
Hello, everyone, and thanks again for having me, as always.
Absolutely. And last but certainly not least is our guest, Wendy Wilburn. Wendy is new to the show. She is a native of the great state of Michigan, Narissa.
Yay!
She grew up in Ann Arbor. She raised her children in the Bay Area of California, and she's a U of M grad, and she's an author and future radio show host, and she's just a bona fide politico. All right, so welcome, Wendy, to the show.
Hello, and thank you.
Absolutely. I hear a little feedback, so make sure that you guys if you have anything else on, that you have it turned off so that we're not getting feedback on the air, on the recording. Okay. Because I'm hearing myself as if somebody has a phone on or something. Yeah. Okay. All right, ladies. So we're just going to get right into it. Right into things right away. If I can find my notes. Now, see there? I can't find my notes. I had them. I promise you I had them because I just wrote them. Anyways, I know what I was going to say. Um, I was going to start with you, Renee, since you're our only candidate person running for an office in the great state of Texas, which we dealt with last week. And I want to know, how's it going for you there in Texas, Renee?
So far, it's going pretty good. We got a nice turnout. It's not quite the same as 2018, but it's still a nice turnout.
Uh-huh.
We're almost reaching that number. We have one more day to go. So lots of young folks are coming out to vote, which is great. We registered. The Democratic Party registered a lot of new voters. Texas registered a lot of new voters. So I think people, and so if they continue to come out like they are, it should go really well.
Okay, that's great news. That's great news. Okay, so ladies, there are so many issues in this midterm elections. And one of them apparently is the slacking of the youth vote. And I thought that was really strange because I've had millennials and my favorite Gen Z, Greer Webb, on this show, and and naturally, they can't speak for the whole country, but they were saying that from their estimations that the youth were really turning out, especially Gen Z. Gen Z appears to be a lot more what's the word?
Engaged.
Engaged. Very good. They're much more engaged than the millennials even. So I'm curious. I know that Narissa's my person for stats and information and all that good stuff. So Narissa, do you have any words for that on that information about the youth vote? You're on mute. You're muted. You're muted.
Sorry about that. I unmuted myself, and I was like, okay, I got to be ready. And then, of course, I messed up. But I do think that what we really need to understand is that it depends on who you talk to. Because since we last spoke about this, one of the things that I saw is that you have, on the one hand, you have WGBH, which is the public radio and public TV station in Boston, saying that youth voters are turning out in historic numbers. And then you have the Washington Post saying that Democrats should be worried about the youth vote. And so it's all going to come down to who shows up. And the reality is, polling doesn't work the way that we used to be able to rely on it and trust it. So every election from here on out, we have to act like election day and during your early voting period. Those are the only tests. Those are the only polls that matter these days. Because, you hear about Republicans. I was reading earlier today that, they might be submitting polls that are weighting the numbers, toward their favor. And you hear about GOP voters, not answering. And so there's a lot of issues actually on both sides that we really have to be aware of. And really, if you know any young people, or even for that matter, anybody from ages 18 to 80, I would say from 8 to 80, but then the GOP would probably come. She was encouraging underage people to vote when they can't. No, but anybody from 18 to 80 that who is eligible to vote, tell them to get their behind in that voting booth on Tuesday. There's no two ways about it. I was making phone calls earlier today, and the people I spoke to, for the most part, they seemed excited to vote on Tuesday. Many of them had already early voted. We just got to keep the pressure on.
Right. Keep the pressure on. Keep the pressure on. So Wendy, our one panelist on here who's never been on the show before, tell me what you're experiencing there in Georgia.
Okay, well, just to go back to the millennials voting, in Georgia, 20% of the registered voters in the state of Georgia are between 19 and 29.
Wow.
So if they show up and they're voting Democratic, that would be great. They don't have the polling numbers right now, but it's 20%, that age group. Couple interesting things have been going on. I was out and about Friday night, had to go to Kroger's, and I saw people from 19, 20 to 65 passing out voting cards to everyone they saw and putting them on cars. I haven't seen that kind of engagement ever before since I've been in Georgia. And the other thing, I was helping one of my friends with her ballot, and she had an absentee ballot, and the paperwork that was sent to her, because she had to do an affidavit, said to turn it in on the 14th.
You know, that's nothing but a trick.
Right. And she thought she read it at face value, and we dug a little deeper, and it was 3 days past the voting day that you could turn in that affidavit.
Right.
So she got it in, but she was planning on turning it in on the 14th, and her vote wouldn't have counted.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
and see, that's my fear, that there'll be a lot of people. Thank goodness that you were there to help her. But imagine how many other people that would read it that way and they don't have the help. You know?
Exactly. That's scary. That's actually scary.
It's scary. It's very scary. And Latrice in New York, girl, what's this talk I hear about possibly getting a Republican governor? That cannot happen in New York.
I'm glad you asked. And the short answer is I don't know. What I do know is that today was the last day of early voting here in New York State. We had 9 days of early voting dating back to October 29th. I went to vote on November 1st. And thus far, only 400,000 plus people participated in early voting. So that concerns me.
Wait a minute. Not in all of New York.
No, I'm talking about New York City.
New York.
Just New York City.
But that's terrible.
But yeah, just within the 5 boroughs of New York City, only 400,000 plus people showed up to participate in early voting, which concerns me because there's definitely been a lot of promotion and marketing in terms of getting the word out.
Right.
And, you know, again, 9 days, the 29th, 30th, 31st, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, yesterday. And it's like, it's like my hope is that people will show up and show out come Tuesday.
But see, the problem with people waiting until the very last day is that things happen. Glitches happen.
I agree.
Mother Nature happens. And guess what else is happening on November 8th? A major lunar eclipse. That's all I got to say. Things that happen in the sky. I don't trust it. I'm just saying.
No, I understand. It's just that, like, in New York City, it wasn't much turnout, which surprised me because not only are we choosing a governor, we're also Senate Majority Leader Schumer is also up for re-election, along with a couple of other congressmen and congresswomen. In my case, my congresswoman, Grace Ming. There's like a whole slew of offices up for grabs. So I'm hoping that people are just procrastinating and they're going to wait until Tuesday to make their voices heard.
Well,
ma'am. Go ahead, Narissa.
Well, I was just going to say that's a dangerous game. Here in North Carolina, this start on October 20th, 21st, something like that. We have a long period of early voting. It's like it was before Halloween. I know that was
before Halloween.
Yeah. And I was calling myself, you know, going at a low time. It was Friday morning. I was like, this is the last Friday. All the real early birds have gotten out. And it was still a good number of people. And I think that what we have to keep in mind for those dawdlers is it's always easy to make an excuse not to do something, especially if you don't think it's that important. And I understand life gets in the way and you might want to, I have had a horrible migraine for the past 48 hours. You know, we all got things that happen that might, you know, stop us, but we have got to tell all those folks in our lives that yes, maybe you couldn't make it to early voting, but you got to be there on Tuesday, and tell them on Tuesday, if you wait, you're going to have to make a plan. You're going to have to, if you take some meds, you better have your meds in a bag with you. You better bring some snacks. You better bring some water. You probably still, COVID is still going on. You should probably wear a mask if you got to get, you know, real close to people or be in an enclosed area for a long time. So if you know folks who are waiting until Tuesday, you know, some people like the tradition of it, but tell them, you know, be ready because Tuesday is going to be, you know, it's going to be rough. It's going to be a lot of people waiting there.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I have a slightly different concern. My concern is apathy. You know, when you add apathy plus ignorance, it's a death knell for democracy.
Yeah.
And for me, and I'm sure you ladies learned this as children as well. I learned a life lesson I learned early on is that Superman's not coming for me.
Mm-mm.
So I have to be self-sufficient, and voting is a form of self-sufficiency. I'm a law-abiding, tax-paying citizen, and voting gives me a way to have a say in what our government. If government's truly of the people, by the people, for the people,
right,
then I have to do my part by showing up to vote.
That's right. That's right.
And it seems like a lot of people don't understand that everything that we do is regulated. Every single thing we do is regulated, and it's run by the government.
Right.
So you have to vote to have a word in that. But I want to say, conversely, in Georgia, we had 1.8 million early voters opposed to 500,000 the last election.
Wow.
But that's
So
good.
a lot of people got out here, and a lot of it has to do with who's running. We have Kemp versus Abrams, and we have Walker versus Warnock. So people are out there letting their voice be heard. Thank goodness.
What do you think? I keep hearing these. Let me say this as a PR practitioner. Some of these guys that are saying, "Oh, it's going to be a bloodbath" and all of this kind of stuff, and we're just going to take over everything. A lot of that is bravado, and it is PR to get people to dampen down those that will come out, particularly young people, is to discourage people to feel like, well, it's no point, you know, because you got a lot of people already to think that voting, you know, my vote won't count. It's no point me voting, or that type of thing. And I will tell you that Sherry Beasley came to our church just the other Sunday when we did Souls to the Polls last Sunday at my church, and we had a very, very good turnout. And she says to us, she says, I know the power of each individual vote. She lost her Supreme Court race by 401 votes.
Wow.
Meanwhile, there was over 400,000 registered Democrats that did not vote. So the thing is, we know statistically, we know that when we turn up, when we show up, we win. And they know that too. But they'll say and do anything to keep us discouraged from voting. Like now, I was just hearing about the intimidation that's going on at some of the polling places, at drop boxes and that type of thing. And I don't know if any of you have heard about that, or you've seen it, or had any friends experience it. Wendy, have you heard anything about it?
I haven't seen anything, but it was kind of a runaround. I've heard two different people and myself where you could drop off the absentee ballots. Mm-hmm. The drop boxes have been removed, as they promised they were going to do it, especially in a Republican state. Mm-hmm. So I went to a polling place, and they go, you can't drop them off here. I had to go to the actual courthouse. So I heard from a couple of people, same type of thing. They kind of got the runaround on where they could drop off their absentee ballot, but no intimidation, and there was no lines. I voted Thursday. Mm-hmm. No lines, but I had to go to the courthouse instead of being able to go to a place that I had been able to go in the past or drop it in a box.
What about you, Renee? Have you have you heard about any intimidation at boxes or anything like that? I know Renee has
Well, no,
children.
actually, we haven't had any cases that I noticed come up.
Mhm.
um, we don't. I haven't heard of any cases that we had any issues, but I can say that we don't have drop boxes here in the Austin area. You actually have to take it into an issues. As far as intimidation, I haven't heard of anybody having any problems yet. I'm concerned about election day, actually. I think if anything is going to quote pop off, it's going to be during it's going to be on Tuesday when there's going to be longer lines and things of that nature. Um, and back to some of the conversation that we had about polling, as far as polling is concerned, this midterm is not like any other midterm that we've had. So all of the pollsters are at a loss. Data is only as good as the subjects that you test. It's only as good as the turnout, and it's only as good as the methods that you use. So they're missing a lot of people. I mean, when you have a 500,000 people being registered in different states per state, you're going your tooling and your method is never going to capture those people because they're not in the system yet. So, and also I'd say that the 2020 census has missed a lot of people as well. So there are more people in our state than we have data for. So you're going to miss a lot of folks. And also not meeting people where they are. Nobody really uses landlines any longer. They're using cell phones, and many people don't even answer their cell phones. So they're not capturing the population that they should. And so we're missing a lot of it. So I'm banking that the polls are way off. Now, I'm not going to say it's not going to be close races. I just think there are going to be a few surprises in there, and people are going to just be surprised at who actually won.
Narissa, as far as voter intimidation, that type of thing, what should we do if we find ourselves in some of these situations?
First of all, and I'm glad you could, because I don't know if I'm the only lawyer here. I don't know if I'm the only lawyer here today. I do want to remind everyone that voter intimidation, especially through force, is a federal crime. And it's a state crime in most places as well. So I would say call 911, actually. Because they are committing a crime, especially if you see people out there, trying to turn people away under false pretenses, people brandishing guns close to a polling site, whatever kind of foolishness they come up with, just understand that it is illegal. And there are hotlines that you can call. I used to have all of them memorized, but it's like 1-888 my vote one. It's a whole bunch of other ones. Go to Stacey Abrams' site, Fair Vote. And there's a number there as well. But yeah, call your local and let them know, because let them know that people are violating the law, because that is not something that should ever happen. Everyone in this country has the right to vote for whomever they want without an atmosphere of fear and intimidation around them. So that's the first thing. But I also did want to go back to something that I think it was Miss Wendy that said something that just triggered in me. The ignorance is a big problem. And I want to talk about that in two ways, just really quickly, if I can. You mentioned that so many people don't understand that there's regulations. And what I used to do when I taught law school is, and I taught constitutional law. And so you would think, that doesn't, and I would point at different things in the room, and I would say, there's a law somewhere that affects everything on the state, local, or federal level, from how many people can be in this room to the quality of the air in this room, what kind of carpet can be in here, and the kind of stuff it's giving off. There's all sorts of things that are required to be in place. And a lot of people don't know. And when I talk to young people, what I do is I'll ask them, like, okay, tell me an issue you care about. So they might say the environment or Black Lives Matter. So if they say Black Lives Matter, I said that is a state, local, and federal issue. people would make me so mad when they would say, well, Obama's not a good president because he's not doing anything about crime in Chicago. That man is the president. That's not in his jurisdiction. He can't. And if he did, we would be upset because that is a breach of his position. But people don't understand who has authority over what. So the other thing I'm asking those folks who are listening, who do know how things work, tell the folks, young or old, that if you have good people in charge making decisions, good things happen. If you have bad people in charge making decisions, bad things happen. It's a reason why California has a reparations committee, the first one in the country at a state level, where they're examining reparations. In Florida is out here trying to ban critical race theory and take they don't want you to mention race in the math problems, and they don't want people to say the word gay in Texas. It's all ridiculous. But it's also a distraction to get their folks riled up. They got to keep them afraid. People only vote, what I learned in political science, people only vote out of hope or fear. So the Republicans have chosen fear. But on our side too, I feel like our young people have lost hope, because some of them feel like, well, I voted and nothing changes. And what I tell them is like, well, you knucklehead, that's because you can't just vote every 4 years.
Yep.
President doesn't solve everything. You have to vote.
Nor is it their job.
Mid-year elections. And I tell people all the time, I said, Nancy Pelosi is the most powerful person in DC, but they don't believe me because when you grow up as a kid, almost everybody's like, well, I want to be the president of the United States or something like that. Nobody says, I want to be speaker of the House. But if people really knew how our system worked, you would grow up saying, I want to be the speaker of the House, because that's where the real power is, because Congress is where the money gets allocated, where the laws are passed. But because people don't know that, and I'll break down the math. I'll say, out of all the Democrats that we've had as president in my lifetime, Jimmy Carter is the only one that had a Democratic majority in Congress for all 4 years of his presidency. Clinton, he came in 92, Newt Gingrich.
Contract with America.
Contract on America, right? Then Obama, he came in 2008, and them Tea Party fools came in 2010. And this is what happens because we don't understand. They always say that the biggest lie the devil told was that he doesn't exist. And I think not just for politics, but in our own personal lives, the biggest lie the devil ever told us that we don't have power. And so these so-called Black celebrities, these blue check mark fools on Twitter out here telling people that their vote doesn't matter. I think that's some of the most dangerous rhetoric that we're facing. And I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot, but I just wanted to get that out.
You did, Narissa. I want to read this comment from Joshua Bradley. He said there was a big problem with voter intimidation in Holly Springs, North Carolina. I didn't hear about that. Joshua, by the way, is running for office in Raleigh. I think he's running for city council, in Raleigh, in the city of Raleigh, in our capital, North Carolina's capital of Raleigh, North Carolina. I did not hear about that in Holly Springs. My goodness.
I wanted to add to what Narissa was saying, how, speaking of famous speakers of the House, the late Tip O'Neill once said, all politics is local. And so when you vote in the presidential election, yes, I'm glad Biden's in the White House, because I sure as hell would not want his opponent there. But at the same time, I don't look for him or Vice President Harris or any of the cabinet members to be miracle workers. Like in terms of addressing crime and sanitating, the environment and other local issues, that's why you have city council. That's why you have assembly. I know in Chicago it's the alderman. Like each city and each state has its own setup, but you have officials on the local level to address those issues too. And it seems like a lot of people, for one reason or another, don't understand that.
Yeah.
We got to take our time to make sure that we educate. No matter what happens in this election on Tuesday, I just said I'm going to make it my business to educate as many young folks and adults as I can on how this system works. And
what's clear to me is that we've had a very poor teaching of civics in school. Our American history classes or whatever, social studies, all of that, it just has been dismal. Because kids,
I don't think it was always that way though, because speaking as, I don't know how old anybody else's kids are, but like having had a kid who is like with all the standardized testing and all of that, we had tests. I remember vividly in Michigan. Those of y'all from Michigan know it was like the MEP test. It was the 4th grade, the 7th grade, I think 11th grade too, or 10th grade. That was the MEP years, and those were the standardized tests you took. But when George W. Bush and them came in with that No Child Left Behind, they test these babies to death for no good reason. But, and I don't blame the teachers, please don't get me wrong, because the teachers are doing the best they can, but to keep their jobs, those teachers have to get certain levels on the test, and they're testing for math and for reading. So where's the time that you would have learned the state capitals or learned how the government works or any of that other stuff? And it's very sad.
Well, in California, my son graduated in 2011. He never learned civics, or they spent very little time on it.
Really?
I mean, not hardly at all. He never talked about it because it's very interesting. And then when Bush was running, he learned a lot just from he and I watching it together. So he should have learned that. I had civics in 7th grade.
Yeah.
And we had a whole semester dedicated to it. But I want to go back to what Narissa was saying real briefly. When I'm talking to young people, just to kind of get them out of that, my vote doesn't count, and, you know, blah, 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 they say it all the time. Voting is also a job review. By voting, if you like what that person's doing, you vote for them and keep them there. It's a job review. Look at it a different way. You know, it's always, nothing's going to happen, nothing's going to change, but it can change for the worst. And that's what I'm worried about. I mean, you know, we all want hope and change, but we don't want to go back 50 years with civil rights, women's rights. We don't want to go backwards. So, you know, I just let them know it's a, you know, voting is a job review. Look at what their policies, what they promised, did they follow up? You know, you can give them a job review. That's what voting does as well.
Right.
That's a good analogy, like a job evaluation. But I think what it is with the younger generation, and maybe to some extent this applies to my generation, I'm a member of Generation X, we took a lot of things for granted. We took a lot, I mean, like, even now when I look back at the 2016 election, if someone were to have told me that, you know, who would have been the last Republican standing, I would have laughed. I would be like, no way. It's just, it's painfully obvious that he wasn't fit for office. And yet, what happened on November 8th, 2016? So I think what it is that a lot of young people, and again, Generation X probably falls in that bunch as well. We took a lot of things for granted. And the past 5-6 years has been like a speeding ball rolling down the hill. When you go back to May, when the Supreme Court made the decision on Dobbs versus Jackson, we knew it was coming. Like I wasn't surprised, but that didn't make the decision any less disheartening.
Yeah.
And I have not forgotten. So that's one of the many reasons why I came out to vote last week.
Go ahead, Wendy.
Speaking of education, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's that was Renee. That was you talking, Renee?
Yes, that wasn't me.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Renee.
Okay, I was going to say on education, ever since No Child Left Behind, which was put in place by the Republican President Bush, it was calculated. It was put in place because basically they wanted to make sure that they took education and got rid of critical thinkers. Everything was based on tests, and teachers had to have certain lesson plans. They couldn't have, creative lesson plans, so to speak. And so that was put into place to make sure that public schools were churning out people that were going to be worker bees. I mean, that's pretty much what it was all about. So ever since then, They got rid of all the civic classes. They took away a lot of art. Remember when they were saying that children weren't going to get art in school any longer? They took away a lot of that.
Yep.
Physical education, all those things.
Music.
And
I
they
do
had to
remember
put
that.
it back. Yeah,
Well,
and they had to put it back because they realized. So anyways, I just wanted to say the education piece is really important. And that's why down ballot is really important, because a lot of these people who move up into some of these top positions, state senators, moving up to the U.S. Congress and all of that, White House VP, have come through the ranks of having down ballot positions and work their way up. And that's what people don't realize, why local elections are so important. And so if we can get that word out to people that you have to vote in off years, because those are the people that are going to move up into the presidential years, and that's gonna have a huge impact. And as we all know here on this panel, that local elections affect us more immediately than national elections anyway.
Exactly. And Joshua Bradley, the gentleman who's also running for office in Raleigh, North Carolina, he says, I would remind people that they need to vote the whole ballot. In the midterms and the presidential election years, the ballots tend to be very large. That's true. They're exhausting. Check both sides of the ballot. I had to flip my ballot over here in Durham, North Carolina to vote, because we had propositions on the backside of things to vote, bond issues to vote for on the backside. And then you had to fill in every single thing, for as you're voting. But it's worth it. It's worth the 10 minutes, guys. It's worth the 10 minutes.
And it's crazy because when I hear these horror stories about what's going on in, say, Georgia or North Carolina, here in New York, it's been a smooth process, relatively speaking. But again, I do not take that for granted. When I went to vote on Tuesday, I was in and out in like 15 minutes, if not shorter than that. And the person who gave me my ballot, she told me, there's in addition to voting for your elected officials, there's 4 ballot initiatives on the other side. Be sure to flip it over and cast your vote on those in addition to the people you're going to vote for. So it was very proactive. They didn't have to remind me of that. I knew that, but they were telling people that as they were giving them their ballots. And so it's just a complete 180 from the dystopian craziness I've been reading about in other states, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. All we need for you, Latrice, you guys, y'all need to show up because your numbers are low.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's why I said at the beginning of the show, I think my gut tells me most people are going to wait until the last minute, and they shouldn't. I mean, I personally like early voting, but, to each their own, so long as you vote. Yes. I can't tell you who to vote for. I can't tell you when to vote. All I can do is tell you to vote.
Right. Well, if they show up at 8 a.m. on the first day of early voting or 7:59 on the last day, they all count. So let's make them all count.
Yeah. And if you
the other thing I was going to say about the ballot, I'm sorry, Pam. The other thing I was going to say about the ballot is that you can print a sample ballot. And that's what I do. I print a sample ballot before I go so I can look and read and research who the candidates are. Sometimes, who share their balloting information just to tell them who they voted for. As a candidate, I don't do that, but other voters do that to help people out, to figure out who's who. And they just give them the bios on these people and say, well, this person is leaning more this way or that way. And so it helps people out. So if you can print it out before you go, you can have an idea of what you're going to do when you get into the polling place. And that's sort of making your plan as well when it says make your voting plan.
Right. Wendy, how have things been for you since you spent so many years in California and now you're living in the South? Have you had whiplash or what?
Well, I mean, being raised in Michigan, totally different than California, and they're all just so different. And I like them all for different reasons. But I'm at a different stage in my life in Alabama, in Atlanta.
Uh-huh.
And there's a lot to do, but it's slower than California. But when I lived in California, I was young. So, the fast life was the great life. Now this is a slower pace and I appreciate it, a lot. But I want to talk a little bit about voting, which changed here in Georgia. When Stacey Abrams ran 4 years ago against Kemp, everyone in Georgia felt that Stacey won.
Yes.
And she
I
did.
I did an absentee ballot that year. And something happened with the absentee ballots, and I got the distinct feeling that my vote did not count that year. Many people's votes did not count. Okay, so after that, I voted in person. This year I did absentee again. And what I like what they did, I've already received an email that said my vote counted.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because
so I liked that
a lot the 4 years ago, because I remember hearing all that stuff that he had purged voting things and rolls and what have you. Yes.
And the absentee ballots just disappeared. Supposedly they just disappeared, but I like the checks and balances to know that my vote counted 2 days after I voted.
Okay. Well,
so that's a good system.
We shall see. We shall see. I want to show you guys a few things. I want to share with you a few items, a few short video clips. Hold on one second. No, that's not it. What am I doing, Pam? Okay, I'm gonna share. All right, let's see. Okay, I want you to see this message from an entrepreneur here in North Carolina.
I am Letitia Hill Goodette, owner of Ottendorf Laboratories. In America, our freedom of speech and the right to peacefully protest is a wonderful thing, but faith without works is dead. Will you take souls to the polls? If you don't vote, all of your activities were done in vain. I am an ordained minister, a presiding elder in the AME Zion Church, a wife, a mother. I am spending my time and my resources to encourage you to vote.
Paid for by Ottendorf Laboratories.
Okay. So I'm just so pleased with that because, nobody told her to do it. She didn't have to do it. But could you imagine if other people, small business owners, did the same just to encourage people to vote? It'd be a powerful thing. Powerful. Here's something very important from President Obama.
Some of your parents are on Social Security. Some of your grandparents are on Social Security. You know why they have Social Security? Because they worked for it. They worked hard jobs for it. They had chapped hands for it. They had long hours and sore backs and bad knees to get that Social Security. And if Ron Johnson does not understand that, if he understands giving tax breaks for private planes more than he understands making sure that seniors who've worked all their lives are able to retire with dignity and respect, he's not the person who's thinking about you and knows you and sees you, and he should not be your senator from Wisconsin. Some of your parents are on Social Security. Some of your grandparents are on Social Security.
Okay. So I tell you, listen, guys, we needed Obama much earlier in this race. We needed our heavy hitters. We needed Oprah to stand up for Fetterman much earlier in these races. And that's one of my staunch criticisms of the Democratic Party is that we're too slow on our actions and we're much too slow and not as efficient on our messaging. It drives me crazy. And Obama he just let it rip. And he was so effective. And that's what we need. We don't need this oh, you're so nice and da 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 da. And unfortunately, that's kind of what happened here in North Carolina in our Senate race. And now things are getting tougher. But the thing is, the commercials at the beginning, and I know that Mrs. Beasley, she is a wonderful, wonderful woman. She's a judge, so she's very moderate and kind and southern and very nice. But meantime, Ted Bud had a Glock literally in his waist over at the border of Mexico. That's how his ad started down here. Right, Narissa?
Well, see, I didn't see that one.
Girl, I saw all of them.
And quite honestly, whenever those Republican ads, the only time I see them is on YouTube. I report them and I block them because I'm like, I don't want to see this mess. But I have seen several of the ads, though. The one that I couldn't block because it wasn't from him. And my daughter and I would laugh about it because it's like liberal Sherry Beasley, and she's dangerously liberal and all of this stuff.
Yes.
And one thing, and I know that you and I both have ties to marketing. Of course, you have a lot more experience, but yes, words do matter. And I will give you that. But I want to say as a counterpoint, if you saw what happened on January 6th, and you wasn't already planning where you was going to vote on January 7th, if you need Barack Obama or Oprah to tell you to vote, that seemed like a you problem also at that point.
I know, but that's how people, but we have to understand though, Marissa, and I'm going to say this strictly from a marketing and PR point, celebrity and people you look up to matter. What they say matter, and consequently we use them too late. I mean, we need to be using them earlier.
So from the political standpoint, yeah, you might say too late, but they want to get that final push. Because if you bring out Barack in the beginning, then that feeling is going to wear off by the time it's time to vote. So it's like it's a double-edged sword.
Right.
I think both of you ladies make valid points, and this goes back to what I was saying before about apathy. Like, I mean, I agree with you, Narissa. Like, at this stage, if you need Oprah or Obama to tell you to go cast a vote, it's kind of like, well, where have you been the past couple of years? I mean, like, even before January 6, 2021, like, before all that, haven't you been paying attention? Like, I mean, I understand where Pam is coming from in terms of celebrities and whatnot, but it's like, this stuff is going to affect you. Like, this is like, I think a lot of people see democracy as some abstract concept, not realizing that if the worst case scenario comes to pass, again, Superman's not coming to save you.
Voted off the island. Exactly. But
they need to understand it like a reality show, because our people, I hate to say it, so many of our people are not real critical thinkers. I'm telling you, it's scary how people think now. They're not very evolved in their thinking.
If you're referring to who I think you're referring to, that's a whole other show. If you're referring to who I think you're referring to.
I want to say two things in response. First of all, I want to say that it's not, if you say our people, meaning our demographics as Black people, that's one thing. I'm going to come back to that.
I'm talking about everybody. I'm talking about Americans in general.
Yeah. But I also think that white folks have I like the word that you use, Ms. Alicia, about apathy. But the thing is that when you have privilege, and you're used to being on top, you're going to vote because there's very little anyone can tell you about your vote not counting. Look at how they acted a fool talking about the election had to have been stolen. They knew it wasn't. They still know it wasn't. They just can't stand the fact that they know. Now, I got to look this up to make sure I'm right, but I want to say the last white president, the last Democrat that got a majority or plurality of white male votes was Bill Clinton in 92.
Wow.
And see, here's my issue regarding the 2020 election. The election should not have been as close as it was.
Yes,
The
but
fact that,
gets to
yes,
my
Trump
other point,
lost,
though.
period. There's no
That gets to
debate
that.
on that. But the fact that the vote was as close as it was, to me, is one of the many troubling signs.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, but it's also because with us, I think honestly, the other piece is some of us, and I want to write something about this. We don't know anything about Black history, just
No.
to be real. And
True.
I think that we know enough to know that slavery was bad, and we know enough about the vague, like amorphous kind of thing. We know it's something called Black history, and it was bad, and there were some good parts, and we strong. But if you don't know the details, if you don't know, like right now, like for the past week or so, I had so much anxiety about this election. I talked to Miss Pam about it when I was talking to her about this. But all I can think about is Reconstruction in that period after Reconstruction and what they went through and how it took almost a good like 90 years to right that ship and turn it back around. And I still don't know if some of the fools who were out there, and by I mean the celebrities who were out there, because that's the downside to it too, because you got people out there talking about, oh, you don't need to vote because blah, blah, blah. And I don't know if they know how long it's going to take us to undo the damage that Trump did just in the judiciary.
Yeah.
Just on the Supreme Court.
He did.
I mean,
so
they're going to have a Supreme Court. Amy Coney Barrett's only a couple of years older than me. They're going to have a Supreme Court majority for the foreseeable future, unless there's like something major that happens, or unless if we win on Tuesday, maybe we can get the legislation to expand the court or something like that. But all these things you want, that you claim you want, you can't get. And the analogy I've been trying to use, people like if you see somebody in a car accident and they're bleeding, you can't slap a Band-Aid on and hope that they're not going to bleed out. You got to keep the pressure on. Right. And you can't take the tourniquet off until the bleeding has been stopped. And I think some of us, we show up every 4 years like, oh, well, I slapped my Band-Aid on. And then it's like, why are you still bleeding? Because you didn't keep the pressure on. We have to vote. We have to protest. And because, you know, I feel like this is a safe space, I also got to say, I think some of us too think voting is not as, you know, as masculine or as powerful as, I mean, you know, you got to see those pictures of Huey Newton, you know, in the chair, you know, with the guns and everything, and Malcolm X looking out the door. Yeah, but also that was the 60s. And I hate it when people quote things like, well, you know, Martin Luther King said if a Negro in Mississippi can't vote or a Negro in New York doesn't feel he has anything to vote for. This is a new day. Adam Clayton Powell was the only Black man in Congress when he said that. Times have changed. We do have things to vote for. We have people who care, who can do things, but they can't do it unless we vote for them.
Okay.
And also you mentioned the 60s. Back during the 60s, there were no Black women in Congress.
No.
We weren't able to get through the door until the 70s, the decade I was born in. And even now, like, there are no Black women in the Senate.
None.
There's a handful. We have some representation in the House of Representatives, but not nearly enough.
Right.
And
we got to read some of our audience here. Okay, Freddie M. Butler. I sent out over 2,100 robocalls and explained the issues and tell them to vote Democratic. She's in Detroit. Okay, Adrian Johnson. Sherry Beasley needed her stronger surrogates on the ground back in May to now. You're exactly right, Adrian. Unfortunately, some folks need that last minute push to the polls. Some folks are not as politically or civically plugged in. They need that last minute push to the polls. Okay. Alicia, January 6th, the reversal of Roe v. Wade, and most recently, the attack on Pelosi's husband should have folks taken and awoke.
Agreed, Alicia. And it shouldn't have taken that. But I agree with what Alicia just wrote there. And, you know, like, I don't want to change the subject because it's a complete 180, but it is related to what we're discussing. When you think about like you mentioned, celebrities and the influence they have. Exhibit A is Kyrie Irving. I mean, I'm in New York, so I've been hearing about that nonstop for the past several days.
Yeah.
And again, it just shows the extent, the lack of history, the lack of self-awareness, if you will. Because I posted on my Twitter account when that happened, like, what good did he think would come from posting that? Now, granted, he didn't say anything about the movie one way or the other, and I haven't watched it, so I have no comment on it. But I just feel like if he had people around him who had his best interests at heart, they would be like, you know what, Kyrie, don't do it.
Yeah, but I think that a lot of these people don't, and I think, and actually, this is on the subject of off the subject. One of the things that is in my profession in public relations, we're going to have a discussion, a webinar on the use of social media and public relations. Unfortunately, a lot of people think, celebrities think that since they have a big presence on social media, they can say whatever they want, but they have no strategy, no plan, no nothing to what they're saying. So it ends up falling flat and putting them in trouble. That's another subject. Cheryl Mack said, if there is a mistake on the absentee ballot once submitted, it cannot be corrected, and therefore, I'm just saying. Okay. Okay. We got a few more. We got one more here. Joshua says there are white supremacists running for school board all over North Carolina. Lord have mercy. It is important to make sure that they are not elected. We don't want them in charge of our kids' education. Amen.
Wow.
Amen. And that's happening all over the country. And also within the Secretary of State's offices, all of these local elections, you've got to vote. You think you've got troubles now. You get some of those people in your local towns running things, and you'll see how you feel later that you didn't vote. Don't complain if you don't vote.
My father used to always say to me growing up, if you don't vote, you don't have the right to complain.
That's right. That's right.
He would always say that to me and my brothers.
But see, we're even beyond, we're beyond that. We're beyond that. You don't have the right to complain. It's so much more severe than that.
Yes.
They have to vote. It's not even about complaining. I mean, it's scary. It's terrifying right now.
It is. I'm terrified to be honest.
I am.
With you. I'm trying not
to. Let me ask you ladies something. What are you doing in your states?
Mm-hmm. Well, what are we doing?
I just wanted to ask what you ladies are doing in your state to get out the vote.
I do a lot of digital stuff, as you well know. I do a lot of that, and I do. I talk to people. I'm involved in a lot of things. I do mostly a lot in digital spaces, getting things out in mass to people and what have you. I don't do the door-to-door knocking stuff because I don't want anybody coming to my door either. I tell them I got it. You know, only because of safety reasons.
Well, I was gonna say here in New York, on the board, some of my fellow board members, they've done the phone banking and get out the vote door to door. I have not done that, but some of my fellow community board members have. So and that's the thing. That's why I was so surprised at the turnout in the early voting, because I mean we've had boots on the ground. Yeah. So at least where I live in the area that Queens Community Board 6 represents, they can't say they didn't know.
Right.
It's been in the local papers. It's like there's been TV ads. Like the word has been out.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, and here in Georgia, I do a lot online and a lot of conversations, but because my son's 29, he has a lot of friends, and I talk to them, and I talk to any young person I can. Yes. I haven't done any door-to-door canvassing this election run, but I talk to a lot of people. I bring it up all the time. Mm-hmm. You know, so I feel like I'm doing my part. Maybe I could make some phone calls, but
I feel from this group, I know that we're all doing things in our own capacity, because everybody's not gonna dig the same, do things the same way. They're just not. Let's see. Here's another comment. Election. Oh God.
I agree with that, Pam. I
Huh?
agree. Pam, I agree with that. I'm sorry. I agree with that. I said I totally agree with that because personally, I wouldn't want any of my staff of color knocking on doors, not with all the crazies out there. I don't think
Yeah.
it's safe. So
That's a
we
good
do
point.
like
I had a bad
lit
experience
drops,
with
literature
people
drops. Yeah,
Yeah,
I just don't feel comfortable with that.
yeah, I had a bad experience with somebody coming to my door and wanting to come in. It was two of them, and so I don't do it. Mm-mm. That was some time ago, and I just feel like the way the times are now, it's not comfortable. Let's see. Election deniers should be automatically disqualified for running for elected office. I hope voters will cancel them at the polls on Tuesday. Adrian, whew, you said a mouthful because I can't comprehend. And I'm gonna tell you that Kerry Lake in Arizona, y'all, I just don't know. I don't know what's happened to people. I think the mental health, the crazies, and everything else have just everybody's out here doing weird stuff.
I don't think it's mental health unless racism is a mental illness, and maybe it should be in the DSM. But I think that, and this goes back to having a lack of knowledge of history. Every single time Black folks, Latinos, anybody has like gotten a little bit further ahead, you see a white backlash. It's like a dance step or like a computer program. You can predict it. Like, remember back in the day, somebody said, Janice, remember programming basic, if this, then that, right? It goes like that. Or like Chris Rock said, if somebody is anti-Semitic, you better start listening because they're going to drop the N-word next, because he said that train is never late, because that's just, those things go together. And I think that we need to start taking our history seriously and learn, because the difference at our point in history is that we do have more power, we do have more clout, and the demographics are changing to be on our side.
Yes.
If we show up and vote and do what we need to do, we can have power. If we don't, my biggest fear is that we will end up like South Africa and be a country that is majority non-white, but still ruled by a white majority that holds the political and economic power. And if we sit on our hands, that's what we will be.
That's an excellent point, Narissa. Excellent point. Oh my God.
And in terms of the demographics of this country changing, that has been in the works for decades. Even back in the 90s, I remember reading about how, by the year 2020, give or take a few years, whites would be in the minority. Yes. So in terms of everything we're seeing right now, like the backlash, it doesn't surprise me at all. It's just a matter of who's going to prevail, good or evil. And in terms of Adrian's comment about the election deniers, you got the biggest one already sowing the seeds for 2024. I mean, it's no mistake that he referred to Florida's governor as Ron Sanctimonious.
Yes.
He's laying the groundwork for another run, people. Pay attention.
And I say let him, because he's going to be locked up by then, or at least facing trial. So I don't know what he thinks is going to happen. If he thinks that they're going to magically stop investigating or looking into him because he announces his candidacy, I say, good luck with that. Yeah.
I hope you're right. But then I was expecting him to be impeached and convicted, and well, here we are.
Yeah.
I hope you're right, though.
But see, the impeachment is different, because impeachment is a political exercise. What he's going through now, that's not a political exercise. What he's facing in Fulton County, in Georgia, and what he's looking at in New York, because Tisha James, the Attorney General in New York, she handed all that fraud stuff over to the Southern District of New York, to the U.S. Attorney there, and to the Manhattan District Attorney. He can't get out of that. So even if he wanted to say, oh, well, first he can't say I'm the president, you can't investigate me. He could say I'm running for president, but then anybody could say that. Everybody
They don't care about that.
Could just say, oh, I'm declaring my candidacy for president, so you can't investigate me. There's no precedent for that. But even if it were, how's that going to stop Fulton County, New York City, and how is that going to stop the DOJ from continuing to look into the papers that he stole? That cat is out the bag, and yeah, that's not gonna stop. And there's a lot of precedent on that already. What we're seeing is what would have happened if Nixon had not had the sense to resign. But unlike Nixon, Trump has no shame, no coup, no home training, as old folks used to say. So he don't have sense enough to, they say, go somewhere and sat down. He ain't got that kind of sense. So he's going to keep putting himself out there, not realizing that it's not going to turn out the way he wants it to.
Well, so far, I have to say, even though it's in much trouble as he's in, he's like the Energizer bunny. He just keeps going and going and going. And I've never seen anything like it.
Well, it seems that way, I think, because of the difficulty in prosecuting something of this nature. And I have been really defending Merrick Garland because this is a historically unique position. Mm-hmm. Nobody else has ever had to prosecute a former president of the United States, ever. So they had to get all their ducks in a row, and that's what they're doing. And they're investigating because they know that if they go off half-cocked, all they're going to do is get all those MAGA types all riled up. And so that's why the best part about that Mar-a-Lago warrant was all the, Republicans saying, well, they didn't have to do that. They could have just asked him for the papers. Well, they did. Well, they could have just issued a subpoena. They did that. He ignored it. So basically, he forced their hand. And that's the kind of thing you have to do. But that goes back to another reason to vote. We'll never get to the bottom of January 6th if the Republicans take over the House, because they're going to kill that committee.
I know.
They don't want that committee.
That's a fact.
Yeah. So I don't know if people, this goes back, though, to what we said in the beginning about what Ms. Latrice said. People not understanding how things work, and the ignorance of it all is like, oh, well, what happened to Trump getting subpoenaed to testify in front of the January 6th committee? Well, there is no more January 6th committee. Oh, well, I didn't realize that. No, and we have to understand the basics of how our government works. Biden doesn't control gas prices. He doesn't control the price of the cereal, in the store or whatever. He has no control over that. That's, far out of the loop. But the things that he does have control over is appointing judges and whether or not to start a war. And those are the things in the Constitution that the president definitely has control over. And if we get a Republican-controlled House and Senate, particularly the Senate, Biden's not going to get another judge through there.
No.
Well, the other thing that they don't understand is corporate profits equal inflation.
Exactly.
They're blaming the president. It's corporate profits that's causing this.
And it's Katie Porter that's pulled out the whole 411 stuff. But again, and even all the wins that we've had with Biden in office, nobody's really talking about all the wins listen, we have another pandemic. You think you're going to get $1,200 checks from the government? Nope. If the Republicans take over, they want you to die. They already told you. Some people got to die. Don't you remember that?
I do. In Texas, I remember that. And that's another thing. Like, the pandemic is not over, contrary to popular belief. Like, I still wear my mask when I leave the house because, again, Superman's not coming for me. If I get sick, I'm on my own.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Cheryl Mack says, lack of knowledge equates to fear. Some young people are not interested in history.
They need to be. They better be.
Rules are changing. Our brothers who are not a part of mainstream America are not added, therefore are not counted.
The irony there is that they actually do count them, but they count them in a really egregious way. I've been reading up on that, how they use prisons
Yeah, the
for
prison. Yep.
gerrymandering. It's a whole hot mess. I don't have time. We would have to turn the clock back to 8 just to go through all of that.
I tell you guys, this is this is something. We let's see, Adrian, shame on the media for not reporting the truth and facts about inflation, corporate profits. Well, they have been reporting on it now because Katie Porter did a breakdown and stuff of it. So they've reported that. But
Katie and her whiteboard is never wrong.
Right. But the problem is the rhetoric is Biden and inflation. You should see all the ads.
Yeah,
Warnick voted for Biden with inflation. States, that's all the ads. They're talking Biden, inflation, and they voted for inflation. I mean, that's all they're talking about.
Right. And it's such a lie, because who knew that Ukraine was the breadbasket of America? Who knew that look at climate change. They didn't want to do anything about climate change. The Mississippi River is almost dried up. How are you going to transport goods and stuff if you don't have the river to transport some of this stuff?
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of layers of issues that are impacting everything. So, it's just a mess. But the bottom line tonight, guys, is that we want people to what? Vote. You guys, you got to get out here and vote. Blue up and down the ballot. Please share this video. Please share it with everyone. Please hit the thumbs up on the video. Please consider subscribing to YouTube, my YouTube channel. If you're on Facebook, hit the thumbs up. If you're on YouTube, hit the thumbs up and subscribe. If you're on LinkedIn, hit the thumbs up. I appreciate all of you guys. We went 11 minutes over, so we had a great conversation.
Thank you, Pam.
Thanks a lot.
Already voted. All of us have voted.
Thanks, ladies.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed the conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks, ladies.
Go get them, girl. Be justice of the peace in Georgia and Austin, Texas.
Yay!
All right, thank you.
Good luck with your campaign.
Good night.
Thank you, Alicia. I appreciate the comment. Thank you. Good night, ladies.
Good night.
Bye, everybody.